Anika Sharma and Rohan Mehra's fairy tale wedding turned deadly when, just 21 days later, Rohan's shocking secret put Anika's life at risk, and no one saw it coming. The wedding was celebrated with great excitement and hope, bringing together two very different worlds. The bride belonged to a quiet Indian town where traditions were deeply respected and life moved at a gentle pace. She was known as someone who believed in family, patience, and simple dreams. The groom, on the other hand, arrived surrounded by stories of wealth and success from Dubai. His polished manners, expensive clothes, and confident presence impressed everyone. To the bride's family, this marriage felt like a rare opportunity that could change her future forever. The ceremonies were arranged quickly, almost too quickly, but no one questioned it openly. Relatives whispered about how lucky the bride was, while neighbors admired the grand decorations and generous hospitality. Photographs captured smiling faces, bright lights, and rituals filled with blessings. The bride herself appeared calm and trusting, accepting her new life with quiet faith. She believed that marriage was a partnership built on responsibility and respect, and she carried those beliefs into every ritual. Behind the joyful atmosphere, there was an unspoken pressure to agree with every decision. The groom's influence was strong, and his words carried weight because of his status. When he spoke about a modern life abroad, it sounded like a promise of comfort and safety. The bride imagined a future where she could support her family and grow into her role as a wife with dignity. No one noticed how little time the couple had spent truly knowing each other. The wedding ended with blessings, laughter, and dreams, while unseen shadows quietly settled over the beginning of their union. Only a few days after the wedding rituals were completed, preparations for travel began. The bride barely had time to settle into her new identity as a married woman before suitcases were packed and documents were arranged. The groom explained that returning to Dubai quickly was necessary because of work responsibilities and business commitments. His words sounded practical and responsible, leaving little room for disagreement. The bride's family felt proud that she was stepping into an international life, even though their hearts felt unexpectedly heavy. The farewell was emotional but rushed. There were no long goodbyes or final gatherings, just hurried blessings and reminders to stay in touch. The bride promised to call often and share stories of her new life. As she left her hometown, familiar streets and faces disappeared behind her, replaced by the unknown. The journey felt overwhelming, yet she convinced herself that this was the beginning of something meaningful. After arriving in Dubai, everything appeared grand and unfamiliar. Tall buildings, quiet highways, and a large house surrounded by high walls became her new surroundings. The comfort was undeniable, but it felt distant and cold. The groom encouraged rest and asked her to avoid unnecessary calls, saying she needed time to adjust. Gradually, her contact with home became limited, not by force, but by constant excuses and delays. Days passed with strict routines she did not choose herself. She was told when to eat, when to sleep, and when to leave the house. Medical checkups were introduced early, described as standard procedures required for living abroad. The bride trusted these decisions, believing her husband knew better about life in a foreign country. Though she tried to stay hopeful, a quiet loneliness began to grow. The journey that was meant to bring happiness slowly started to feel like a path where her voice and choices were fading, unnoticed by those who had sent her away with love and trust. As the days passed, small changes began to appear in the bride's behavior and routine. She no longer shared daily updates with her family, and when she did send messages, they were short and carefully written. The warmth that once filled her words seemed missing. Her social media accounts stopped showing activity, which was unusual for someone who loved preserving memories. When relatives tried to call, the conversations ended quickly, often interrupted by reasons related to tiredness or poor network signals. Inside the house, life followed a strict pattern. She was rarely allowed to step outside alone, and visitors were almost non-existent. The luxury around her did not bring comfort. Instead, it felt like a silent space where time moved slowly. She began attending frequent medical appointments, always arranged by her husband. These visits were explained as routine health checks needed after travel and lifestyle changes. No details were shared, and no second opinions were allowed. Her eating habits changed, and she appeared weaker during video calls. She spoke less and listened more, as if carefully choosing every word. Family members sensed something was wrong, but could not clearly identify it. Whenever concern was expressed, it was dismissed with calm reassurances. The bride herself seemed unsure, caught between trust and unease. Gradually, she stopped initiating contact altogether. Days turned into weeks without updates. Her phone remained unreachable for long periods, and messages went unanswered. The distance between her old life and her new reality grew wider. What looked like a quiet adjustment from the outside was actually a slow disappearance. The bride was becoming invisible, not through sudden force, but through controlled isolation. By the time her absence became noticeable, the silence around her had already settled too deep, hiding truths that would only surface much later. Long before the wedding took place, the husband was carrying a secret that shaped every decision he made. Years earlier, he had been diagnosed with a serious kidney condition that was slowly worsening. Expensive treatments had delayed the problem but could not solve it permanently. Doctors advised a transplant as the only long-term solution. Waiting lists were long, and legal procedures required time, strict checks, and transparency. For a man used to getting everything quickly, this was unacceptable. Instead of patience, he chose planning. Quietly, he began searching for other options through private contacts and hidden networks. His wealth opened doors that were invisible to ordinary people. Through these connections, he learned how medical records could be accessed, altered, or used for illegal purposes. What he needed most was a compatible donor, someone healthy, young, and easy to control. When the marriage proposal was arranged, it was not chance but calculation. The bride's background, age, and medical history were carefully reviewed without her knowledge. Tests conducted under the excuse of premarital health checks revealed something rare. Her body was a near-perfect match. From that moment, the wedding stopped being a union of two lives and became a step in a much darker plan. After marriage, her medical documents were quietly transferred and updated. New tests were ordered under false names, all approved through private clinics that asked no questions. Every report strengthened his certainty. The husband remained calm and attentive on the surface, playing the role expected of him. Beneath that image, timelines were being set and arrangements finalized. For him, the bride was no longer a partner, but a solution. Her trust and innocence made everything easier. She believed the tests were normal and necessary, never imagining they were part of a plan that valued her organs more than her life. By the time everything was ready, the path he had chosen left no space for hesitation, only execution. On the 21st day after the wedding, everything moved with frightening speed. The bride woke up feeling unwell, complaining of weakness and dizziness that had not been there before. What seemed like sudden illness was treated as an emergency without hesitation. She was taken to a private medical facility known for privacy rather than transparency. The place did not appear on normal hospital lists and catered mainly to wealthy clients who demanded silence along with treatment. The admission process was rushed. Forms were signed on her behalf, and consent papers were approved without proper explanation. She was told that a minor procedure was required to address an internal issue discovered during earlier tests. The environment felt controlled, with limited staff interaction and restricted access. No independent doctors were involved, and no outside communication was allowed. Medical records later showed gaps and altered timestamps. Procedures were logged under vague descriptions that avoided clear medical terms. What was meant to be routine became dangerously invasive. The bride's condition worsened rapidly, but no emergency transfer was made. Instead, additional medications were administered to suppress complications rather than treat their cause. By the end of the day, her body had weakened beyond recovery. The facility recorded her death as a rare and unexpected reaction. There were no alarms, no internal investigations, and no detailed reports. Everything was sealed quickly, as if the outcome had already been accepted. The timing was not accidental. 21 days had been enough to complete legal formalities, medical confirmations, and private arrangements. What the world saw as sudden tragedy was, in reality, the final step of a carefully planned operation. The bride's life ended quietly inside sterile walls, reduced from a living person to a medical outcome that benefited someone else. The news of the bride's death was handled with cold efficiency. The husband informed authorities that she had suffered a sudden medical collapse caused by natural organ failure. The explanation sounded technical enough to discourage further questions. Official documents reflected this version, using medical terms that were difficult for non-experts to challenge. Within hours, arrangements were made to close the case, treating the death as an unfortunate but ordinary event. The husband presented himself as a grieving spouse, following formalities without visible emotion. He insisted that all rituals be completed quickly, citing religious customs and personal distress. A post-mortem examination was quietly avoided, explained as unnecessary and painful. The private clinic supported this decision, providing brief summaries instead of detailed medical reports. With no objections raised locally, the body was released without delay. The bride's family was informed only after the final arrangements were complete. The call came late, carrying shocking news delivered as a finished matter. There was no chance for them to see her, ask questions, or request further investigation. Distance and legal barriers worked against them, leaving them helpless and confused. Their grief was mixed with disbelief at how fast everything had ended. Official records marked the death as closed within days. No red flags were raised, no deeper checks initiated. The husband returned to his routine life soon after, supported by medical recovery of his own that went unnoticed. To the outside world, it was a tragic case of sudden illness. But beneath the paperwork and formal statements, something felt wrong. A young, healthy woman had died too quickly, too quietly. Her death had been wrapped in efficiency, not care. What was labeled natural was anything but, and the truth waited patiently for someone willing to look beyond the surface. Days after the funeral rituals were completed, the bride's belongings were sent to her family in India. The package arrived without warning, carrying clothes, jewelry, and personal items that still held her scent. There was no letter, no explanation, only a brief note listing the contents. As her family sorted through everything, grief slowly turned into confusion. Some items were missing, while others looked unfamiliar, as if they had been added later. Among the belongings were copies of medical papers. The documents appeared incomplete, with missing signatures and unclear dates. Hospital names were abbreviated, and doctor details were difficult to verify. A relative with basic medical knowledge noticed that the listed cause of death did not match the treatments mentioned. Certain medicines were recorded without explanation, and important test results were absent. Photographs taken during her last video call were examined closely. The family noticed marks on her arms that had not been there before. These details had been ignored at first, overshadowed by shock, but now they raised uncomfortable questions. Phone records showed long periods when her device had been inactive, contradicting claims that she had been resting normally. When the family tried to contact the husband for clarification, responses were delayed and vague. He repeated the same explanation, offering sympathy but no details. Requests for full hospital records were avoided. Each attempt to understand what had happened led to more silence. The family began speaking to lawyers and social workers, even though they lacked resources and influence. Every small clue pointed in the same direction. This was not a simple medical tragedy. The truth was buried under paperwork, distance, and power. Their suspicion grew stronger, replacing helpless grief with a quiet determination to uncover what had been taken from them along with their daughter's life. Months passed with little progress, and the case remained buried under distance and paperwork. Then, without warning, a message arrived that changed everything. It was sent anonymously to an Indian investigative body and contained fragmented details about illegal organ transplants involving wealthy foreign nationals. The message did not mention the bride by name, but the dates, locations, and medical descriptions matched her timeline with chilling accuracy. The information pointed toward a private network operating across borders, using shell clinics and temporary medical teams. According to the message, young women brought through marriage or employment were being medically screened under false pretenses. Their records were altered, and procedures were performed in secrecy. The message suggested that one such operation had ended in death, followed by rapid cremation to erase evidence. Investigators quietly reopened the file. They compared travel records, hospital admissions, and financial transactions. A disturbing pattern emerged. The husband had entered a medical facility only days after his wife's death and stayed under specialized care. Records showed treatment consistent with post-transplant recovery, though officially listed as routine surgery. The timing was too precise to ignore. Further checks revealed payments made to intermediaries and offshore accounts around the same period. Clinics mentioned in the anonymous message had previously been flagged, but never fully investigated due to lack of proof. Now, separate pieces began to connect. What once looked like a sudden personal tragedy now appeared part of a larger, organized crime. The anonymous source disappeared as quietly as it had appeared, leaving behind a trail instead of answers. For investigators, the case had shifted from suspicion to structure. The bride's death was no longer an isolated event. It was evidence of a system designed to protect the powerful while consuming the powerless, and that realization pushed the investigation into dangerous territory. As the investigation deepened, money began to reveal what words could not. Financial records uncovered large transfers made through multiple accounts shortly before and after the bride's death. These payments were routed through offshore companies and private consultants, carefully designed to hide their true purpose. Each transaction alone seemed ordinary, but together they formed a pattern that pointed towards something illegal and carefully planned. Authorities traced payments to medical suppliers, private flight services, and individuals linked to unregistered clinics. Some names had appeared in earlier cases that were never fully solved. When questioned, a few middlemen denied involvement, while others suddenly disappeared. Doctors connected to the facilities resigned, moved abroad, or claimed lost records. The silence around them was coordinated and deliberate. Public attention slowly grew as fragments of the case reached the media. The image of a wealthy, respectable businessman began to crack. Reports surfaced about his unexplained medical leave and sudden recovery. Photographs showed visible signs of major surgery, contradicting his official statements. Pressure mounted on authorities to act despite legal and diplomatic challenges. International cooperation was difficult and slow. Jurisdiction issues allowed delays, and powerful legal teams worked to weaken the evidence. Still, the accumulation of financial proof made denial harder. Every attempt to close the case met new resistance from public interest groups and investigative journalists. What stood out most was how easily money had controlled silence. It had paid for access, protection, and disappearance. Yet money also left traces. Numbers, dates, and signatures could not erase themselves completely. The deeper the investigators looked, the clearer it became that wealth had not only enabled the crime, but also exposed it. The case was no longer about suspicion. It was about proving how far power could go before it finally failed to hide the truth. Years after the tragic events, the husband's carefully constructed world began to crumble. New witnesses came forward, people who had once stayed silent out of fear or greed. Some were former employees. Others were medical staff who had quietly witnessed irregularities. Their testimonies provided crucial details about the illegal transplant, the manipulation of medical records, and the deliberate isolation of the bride. With these accounts, investigators were finally able to connect the dots that had remained unclear for so long. The husband was arrested under international cooperation, facing charges that spanned countries. Legal battles were fierce, with teams of high-powered lawyers attempting to delay proceedings and question every piece of evidence. Despite this, mounting proof, financial transactions, altered medical documents, witness statements, left him little room to maneuver. His image as a loving husband was shattered completely, replaced by the reality of a calculated planner who had used marriage as a cover for murder. The bride's story captured national attention, sparking outrage and debate. Her life became a symbol of the vulnerability of individuals in the shadow of wealth and influence. Laws surrounding international organ trade and medical oversight were scrutinized, and authorities promised stricter regulations to prevent similar tragedies. For her family, the outcome was bittersweet. Justice came, but it could never return the life that had been taken. The bride's story, once silent, became a warning. It revealed how easily trust could be exploited and how greed could overshadow humanity. Yet, it also proved that careful investigation, persistence, and courage could uncover even the most deeply hidden crimes. In the end, her death no longer remained just a number in a medical file. It became a powerful reminder that no amount of wealth could fully erase the truth.